The day will come when Mount Rainier awakens from its slumber, sending a torrent of lava, ash and pumice down its slopes and blanketing the surrounding landscape in a layer of volcanic debris. When that day comes, people living along its flanks will have just hours to flee before the molten tide crashes into their homes. And yet, despite this very real threat, people live in Mount Rainier's shadow every day, sometimes just miles from its summit. With nearly 150,000 people living within 70 miles of the volcano, the potential death toll could be staggering, perhaps as high as 40,000 people. In fact, it might even send shockwaves around the entire planet. But why? And how big is this danger zone? Well, join me today as we try to find out. Mount Rainier is an active stratovolcano and the highest peak in the Cascade Range at over 14,000 feet above sea level. The mountain is situated about 80 miles south of Seattle in Washington state. It is also one of the most dangerous volcanoes in the United States due to the sheer volume of pyroclastic flows and lahars that it has produced throughout history. In fact, Mount St. Helens, which erupted in 1980 and killed 57 people, was just a small child compared to Mount Rainier. That's because Mount Rainier holds the record for the most fatalities caused by any volcano in the United States. This includes the infamous eruption of Mount Vesuvius, which destroyed the Roman city of Pompeii. In 1790, a series of powerful earthquakes and steam explosions accompanied by massive landslides shook the mountain and ejected rock and ash for several days. It is estimated that up to 3.6 cubic miles of debris was released during the eruption, burying everything in sight and traveling all the way to present-day Tacoma, Washington. And that was just one eruption. There were many more before and after that event. So what makes this volcano so explosive? Well, the answer lies deep beneath the surface, where hot, molten rock called magma is constantly churning away. Magma is created when rocks in the Earth's mantle melt due to high temperatures and pressures. As the magma rises toward the surface, it can pool in chambers beneath the Earth's crust, creating magma chambers. However, these chambers are never completely full. They always have space for more magma to rise up and fill them. And that's exactly what happened beneath Mount Rainier. Over time, as more magma poured into the chamber, pressure built up until it was finally released in a series of violent explosions. But the explosions didn't stop there. As the pressure from the magma chamber was released, it caused the surrounding rock to collapse inward, creating a void for more magma to fill and the cycle to begin anew. It is this constant build-up and release of pressure that creates the explosive nature of stratovolcanoes like Mount Rainier. But that's not all. The type of magma also plays a role in creating explosive eruptions. Magma is classified according to its silica content, with the most silica-rich magma being the most viscous, or thick, and sticky. Mount Rainier's magma is particularly viscous, which means that as the magma rises through the volcano's plumbing system, it can become trapped in narrow passages. This creates a bottleneck effect, preventing gases dissolved in the magma from escaping. As more magma tries to push through the bottleneck, the pressure continues to rise until it's finally released in a violent eruption. But what does all this mean for those living near Mount Rainier? Well, it means that they are living in harm's way. That's because the U.S. Geological Survey has identified 4 main types of volcanic hazards that could be posed by Mount Rainier, each of which could potentially affect people living near the volcano. These are lava flows, ashfall, pyroclastic flows, and lahars. Let's take a look at each of these in turn. Lava flows are molten rock that flows down the slopes of a volcano during an eruption. While lava flows are not the most immediate threat from Mount Rainier, they still pose a serious hazard to life and property. Lava flows can travel long distances, reaching speeds of up to 30 miles per hour and temperatures of over 2,000 degrees Fahrenheit. This means that anything in their path, whether it's a forest, a house, or even a person, could be incinerated or completely melted away. Fortunately, the area immediately surrounding Mount Rainier is mostly wildland with little development, reducing the risk of loss of life or property damage. However, the real danger comes from the volcano's other 3 threats: ashfall, pyroclastic flows, and lahars. Ashfall refers to the fine powdery material that is ejected during a volcanic eruption. Ash can travel long distances and accumulate in large amounts, making breathing difficult and causing respiratory problems. It can also contaminate water supplies and damage crops, leading to food shortages. In addition, ash can cause significant damage to buildings, roads, and other infrastructure, making it hard for emergency services to reach those in need. Pyroclastic flows are fast-moving avalanches of hot gas and solid debris that flow down the slopes of a volcano. Pyroclastic flows are extremely dangerous and can travel at speeds of up to 100 miles per hour and temperatures of over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. They can bury entire towns in a matter of minutes, leaving little time for escape. Finally, lahars are volcanic mud flows that can occur during or after an eruption. Lahars are formed when pyroclastic flows or melting snow and ice mix with water and debris, creating a thick, fast-moving slurry that can travel down river valleys. Lahars can be devastating, destroying buildings and infrastructure in their path, and even traveling for miles beyond the immediate vicinity of the volcano. So what would happen if Mount Rainier were to erupt again? Well, unfortunately, no one can say for sure. Each eruption is unique and depends on factors such as the amount of magma released, the viscosity of the magma, and the gas content. However, scientists do have some estimates. According to the USGS, a major eruption could produce lava flows that extend 10 to 15 miles from the summit, ash that blankets an area of 5,000 square miles, and pyroclastic flows that travel 15 miles from the summit. So, what would you do if you lived near Mount Rainier and it started erupting? If you're within the danger zone, your best bet is to get out quickly. That's because once the eruption begins, the U.S. Geological Survey estimates that there would only be hours before the most dangerous pyroclastic flows and lahars reached populated areas. But how much time exactly? Well, that depends on a number of factors such as the strength of the eruption and the topography of the land. In general, though, it's safe to say that residents would have between 4 and 8 hours to evacuate. If you're outside the danger zone but still want to help others affected by the eruption, you can do so by donating to organizations such as the Red Cross or the Salvation Army. You can also volunteer your time to help with relief efforts or simply offer your support to those affected by the disaster. As we've seen, Mount Rainier is a powerful and potentially dangerous volcano. By understanding the risks and taking the necessary precautions, we can all do our part to stay safe. But what if Mount Rainier weren't the only volcano to erupt? What if there was a massive volcanic eruption somewhere else in the world that could have global consequences? For example, what if a supervolcano erupted? A supervolcano is a volcano that has the potential to produce an eruption of magnitude 8 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, which is the highest possible rating. Supervolcanoes are rare, and only a handful are known to exist worldwide, including Yellowstone National Park in the United States. If Yellowstone were to erupt, it could unleash a cataclysmic force that would literally shake the world. Yellowstone National Park is home to the largest supervolcano in the United States. The park is a major tourist destination known for its geysers, hot springs, and wildlife. But it is also home to a supervolcano that could potentially trigger a global catastrophe if it were to erupt. A super-eruption at Yellowstone could send ash and debris around the world, blocking sunlight and disrupting global climate patterns. It could also trigger earthquakes, tsunamis, and other natural disasters, causing widespread destruction and loss of life. The consequences of a Yellowstone super-eruption would likely be felt around the world, affecting billions of people and causing widespread panic and chaos. Even if you don't live anywhere near Yellowstone, you could be affected by the fallout from a super-eruption. So what should you do if a supervolcano erupted? If you live near Yellowstone, you should follow the advice of local authorities and evacuate immediately. If you live farther away, you can still take steps to protect yourself. Stock up on food and water, gather important documents, and make sure you have a plan in place for where you would go and what you would do if you had to evacuate. You should also stay informed by following news updates and listening to local officials. Remember, staying calm and following a plan can make all the difference in a situation like this. Now, it may seem like a far-fetched scenario, but the reality is that super-eruptions have happened before, and they will happen again. The most famous super-eruption in history occurred at Mount Toba in Indonesia around 74,000 years ago. The eruption was so massive that it is thought to have caused an ice age that lasted for several thousand years. While it is impossible to predict when a super-eruption will occur, scientists are constantly monitoring volcanoes around the world to identify any signs of increased activity. For example, Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines had been relatively quiet for centuries before it erupted in 1991, killing hundreds of people and spewing ash and gases into the atmosphere. Similarly, Mount Vesuvius in Italy had been dormant for hundreds of years before it erupted in 79 AD, destroying the Roman city of Pompeii. It is important to note that not all volcanoes erupt in the same way. Some volcanoes, like Mount Vesuvius, tend to produce explosive eruptions, while others, like Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania, tend to produce more gentle lava flows. Understanding the different types of volcanic eruptions can help scientists and emergency responders better prepare for potential disasters. In recent years, scientists have become increasingly concerned about the potential for a super-eruption at Yellowstone National Park. The park is home to the Yellowstone caldera, a massive volcanic crater that formed during a super-eruption about 640,000 years ago. While the chances of a super-eruption are extremely low, they are not zero. In fact, the United States Geological Survey has estimated that there is a 1 in 750,000 chance of a super-eruption occurring in any given year. Despite the low risk, the potential consequences of a Yellowstone super-eruption are so dire that it is important to take all necessary precautions. In the event of a super-eruption, it would be essential to evacuate the surrounding area as quickly as possible. This would allow people to move away from the path of destruction and hopefully minimize the loss of life. In addition, it would be important to develop plans for dealing with the aftermath of the eruption, such as providing shelter and medical care to those affected. Fortunately, scientists are constantly monitoring Yellowstone National Park for any signs of increased volcanic activity. This allows them to identify any potential risks and take steps to mitigate them. Additionally, government agencies such as the Federal Emergency Management Agency have developed plans for responding to a variety of different natural disasters, including volcanic eruptions. These plans can be adapted as needed to ensure that people have the resources they need in the event of a Yellowstone super-eruption. But what about Mount Rainier? How often does it erupt, and when will it blow again? Well, Mount Rainier's eruption frequency has varied greatly throughout history. Between 10,000 BC and 1894 AD, it erupted at least 40 times with intervals ranging from decades to centuries. However, since 1894, Mount Rainier has been quiet. While it is impossible to predict when the next eruption will occur, geological evidence suggests that it could happen at any time. The most recent eruption of Mount Rainier took place in the early morning hours of May 18, 1790. The eruption began with a series of earthquakes, followed by massive steam explosions that ejected rock and ash for several days. The explosions were so loud that they could be heard as far away as San Francisco and Boston. The eruption column reached an estimated height of 20 miles, sending ash and pumice over an area of 2,700 square miles. Today, Mount Rainier remains an active volcano and is closely monitored by the United States Geological Survey. Scientists use a variety of tools to monitor the volcano, including seismometers to detect earthquakes, gas analyzers to measure the release of gases from the volcano, and GPS stations to track any changes in the shape of the mountain. If you're interested in learning more about Mount Rainier and other volcanoes around the world, I encourage you to visit the website of the United States Geological Survey. The USGS provides a wealth of information on volcanoes, including real-time updates on volcanic activity, educational resources, and safety guidelines. Now I want to ask you a question. What do you think would be the biggest challenge in evacuating the area around Mount Rainier? Be sure to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the thumbs up button and subscribe for more exciting content. Thanks for watching.